Next look, decomposition reactions. Decomposition reactions. So we can say that decomposition reaction is just the opposite of combination reaction. In the combination reaction, two or three substances combined together form single products. But in decomposition reaction, single reactants decompose into two or three substances. That is why decomposition reaction is opposite of combination reaction. For example, look here, ferrous sulfates. When heated, it changes into ferric oxide plus sulfur dioxide plus sulfur trioxide. See, here ferrous sulfate is a single reactant. It decomposes into ferric oxide, sulfur dioxide, sulfur trioxide, like that. Similarly, calcium carbonate, when it is heated, calcium carbonate, when it is heated, it will decompose into calcium oxide plus carbon dioxide. This calcium oxide is quicklime. Yesterday, what we said, when it is put into water, we are getting calcium hydroxide. So, calcium carbonate, when it is heated, we are calcium oxide and carbon dioxide are produced. Since it is decomposition taking place due to heating, we call it as thermal decomposition. Similarly, other decomposition reactions are there. Silver chloride. Silver chloride in presence of sunlight. Silver chloride in presence of sunlight decomposes into silver and chlorine. Silver chloride decomposes into silver and chlorine. Similarly, silver bromide also decomposes in presence of sunlight, silver and bromine. Not balanced is also Br2. So these are examples of decomposition reactions. These reactions look here. Here heat energy is absorbed. Here sunlight. Here also sunlight is absorbed. And this reaction is taking place in photography, black and white photography. This reaction is taking place. In all these reactions, one or other form of energy is absorbed. So such reactions we call it as endothermic reactions. Endothermic reactions, yesterday I said about exothermic reactions. Exothermic reactions, if heat is released, endothermic reaction, heat energy is absorbed. Here, heat energy, not light energy, or such one or other form of reactions, energy is absorbed. So, such reactions we call it as endothermic reaction. So, exothermic reaction, endothermic reaction, decomposition reactions, combination reactions, these are. So, study what is decomposition. I just said decomposition is just opposite of combination reaction. It is easy to remember all these things. Look here, another experiment. Here, an iron is in the copper sulfate solution. What happens here? Look, after some time, copper sulfate has the blue color copper sulfate. The blue color of copper sulfate will slowly diminish or disappear, and this iron will coat it with the brown color. So, what is the reaction here? Iron nail in copper sulfate solution. Copper sulfate has blue color. After some time, the blue color of copper sulfate will slowly diminish or disappear, and the iron nail will coated with the brown color. What reaction here taking place? Look here, copper sulfate CuSO4, copper sulfate CuSO4 plus iron. This iron is more reactive than copper, so that copper iron can displace copper from copper sulfate. A more reactive metal can displace a less reactive metal from its compounds. Iron is more reactive, copper is less reactive, so that iron can displace copper from copper sulfate, and you are forming iron sulfate plus copper. This copper is deposited on iron nail. That is why the blue color of copper sulfate will slowly disappear. This type of reaction we call it as displacement reaction. So what is displacement reaction? A more reactive metal can displace a less reactive metal from its compounds. But if look here, if copper in iron sulfate solution, copper in iron sulfate solution, copper in iron sulfate solution, FeSO4, there is no reaction at all. There is no reaction because copper is less reactive than iron. So copper cannot displace iron. So a more reactive metal can only displace a less reactive metal from its compound. For example, zinc, look. Zinc, when react with the copper sulfate. Zinc when react with the copper sulfate, we are getting zinc sulfate plus copper. Here also, zinc is more reactive than copper. So zinc can displace copper. Lead chloride, another example given in your textbook, lead chloride, PbCl2 plus copper, sorry, copper chloride plus lead, Pb equal to PbCl2 plus copper. Here look, lead is more reactive than copper, so it can displace copper from copper chloride. So these type of reaction we call it as a displacement reaction. So what is a displacement reaction? A more reactive metal can displace a less reactive metal from its compounds. These are some of the examples for this type of reactions. Copper sulfate when react with iron, zinc. Okay, look, another type of reactions. See, sodium sulfate, Na2SO4, sodium sulfate, when react with or barium chloride is added to sodium sulfate. Barium chloride is added to sodium sulfate, you are getting a white precipitate of barium sulfate plus sodium chloride. Look at the reaction. When barium chloride is added to sodium sulfate, you are getting barium sulfate, a white precipitate. Here precipitate will get precipitate plus sodium chloride. So here just look there, the exchange of ions. In the place of sodium, there came barium, and in the place of barium, there is sodium. There is just an exchange of ions. This type of reaction we call it as double displacement. Double displacement reaction. So what is a double displacement reaction in which there is an exchange of ions? Is called a double displacement. Example, you can write sodium sulfate plus barium chloride gives barium sulfate plus sodium chloride. Here, barium sulfate's precipitate you will get, barium sulfate's precipitate. So this type of reaction we also call precipitation reaction, precipitation reaction, precipitation reactions. So what is a precipitation reaction? A reaction in which precipitate is formed. So that type of reaction we call it as precipitation reactions. So any reaction that produces a precipitate can be called as precipitation reaction. So what is a precipitation reaction? So you can, two type of questions. What is double displacement? If there is an exchange of ions, such reactions are called double displacement. Here, example you can write sodium sulfate plus barium chloride gives barium sulfate plus sodium chloride. Here, barium sulfate is precipitated, insoluble precipitate is formed. So, such reactions we also call as a precipitation reaction. So, what is the precipitation reaction? A reaction in which precipitations are formed. The reaction is not balanced. Just add 2 here. Now it is balanced.